Excellent. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of We Need to Talk About Sunday. I'm Jason.
And I'm Joe.
And it's just us. So we're still going to be talking about Sunday a little bit. Unfortunately, Gareth isn't all that well, and so can't join us this evening. So we've given him, we've given the evening off to relax and recuperate and get a bit better, because it's more important he's with us on Sunday than it is he's with us now.
That's true. That's true.
We're all in trouble otherwise. So what we thought we would do, Joe and I, is we'll see if it works. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at the theme question sheet things that have been. Oh, Joe's got his. I might be able to share another screen. I can only share one screen at a time. We'll come to it in a minute. I'll share it in a minute. But we're going to have a look at that sheet, and I'll pop a link in the chat to that as well, which is there. There we go. Which is a sheet that Gareth put together to look at, or to help us to think about some of the things, some of the ideas and the readings that we had on Sunday. Joe and I are going to have a bit of a look through that, like as if I guess we were looking through it together at home group or something and just having a natter. Yeah. But also we're going to let you obviously participate if you can, if you'd like to. We have Slideto with us this evening. Katie's got hers, brilliant. We have, there we go, boom. We have Slideto this evening, hopefully, and I'll pop this up now. Bingo. So I was having a chat with someone last week, and and they were saying that actually joining on the chat, like if you're watching this on a TV or something, or on a laptop and you want it full screen or whatever, joining in on the chat can be a bit of a pain. So we've got Slideto set up, and it is slido.com. You just visit it on your phone. I did on your phone or whatever you're not watching us on, because you want to keep watching us. You can use the QR code, go to slido.com, pop that number in, and you can just chat. And we've just got sort of one active poll that you can contribute to. That's what do you think? So if at any point you want to chime in with what Joe and I are chatting about on this sheet or what have you, just drop a note in Slido. And what we're going to do, be kind, yeah. Be kind. What we're going to do is we're going to leave that running for a week. So if you're catching up, not now, if you're watching us a bit later or between now and next Thursday, then it will collate anything that anyone drops in there, and we'll get a chance to perhaps chat about some of those questions or points or ideas or whatever next week. Also, by all means, if you want to drop something in the chat, we'll keep an eye on that as well, and we'll try and sort of munge the two together as we go. This is new and different. I don't know how long I need to leave this screen up for. I'll leave it a bit longer. I could put a link in the description. And chime in with what you think. I'll leave it for a few minutes, and then we'll get rid of it.
Shall we have some thoughts as to, well, usually with our guest, who would usually have been the preacher on Sunday, we would usually ask them what their takeaway message was, what Sunday's service was all about, maybe kind of give us an idea of what happened. We will do a very short job of doing that, because we didn't spend nearly as much time as Gareth would have done in preparing for the service. But I've got an idea as to what I feel was the takeaway message. But Jace, do you want to kind of fill us in any way, shape or form in terms of recapping what you remember about Sunday? Maybe it's the reading, or even just what you think was the takeaway message.
That's a dangerous question. It's a dangerous question, isn't it? Like we could have got this just completely off the wall or wrong there. No. So the reading was an interesting one. It's not very often we get a reading from Kings. I'm quite a fan of Kings. Ask me another time why. But we had the story of we had an account of Elijah, who was fleeing Queen Jezebel. Oh, this is dreadful. I've forgotten it all already. I should know this. Elijah's fleeing like Queen Jezebel, evil queen lady who wants him dead, and he's off hiding, goes to hide. It's in the mountains, isn't it? And then we have this passage. I've got the passage here. I could just read it and cheat. but he hides in the wilderness and prays and whatnot. There's look it up. Look it up online and take a look. But and we have that bit, don't we, where there's a storm and wind and fire, and each time it's sort of God isn't in the wind, God isn't in the fire, and then God speaks to Elijah in this still small voice. And then Gareth talked a bit about how that related to our lockdown experience and how God perhaps might have been speaking to us throughout lockdown, and indeed now as we kind of come out of it, and what it would mean to re-encounter with God, and as Elijah did, to then go back where he came, back from where he came, to kind of carry on with what he was doing, or what he was supposed to be doing before, which of course speaks to, I think, us coming out of lockdown quite well. I hope that's a good.
I think so. Yeah.
I think.
And
good.
well, and so well, I guess we should have said that. Obviously, Gareth was preaching on the overall theme of re-encountering, which is this part of re-emerging, the series. For me, I felt like there were sort of two main points to where to what Gareth picked up on. The first being, ultimately, I think we need to kind of rediscover God's call for us personally and as a collective church. I think we mentioned that with Marion last week, didn't we? That it's not just sort of answering these kind of questions and thoughts from just a personal point of view, but also from a collective, from a community point of view. But yeah, so rediscovering that idea of God's call for us, but then also the second part of kind of getting stuck in. Don't just expect things to just happen without. I think Gareth mentioned at the end of his sermon, he said that don't be surprised if you want mountains moved. Don't be surprised if God gives you the shovel, which I thought was a great kind of visualization of, get stuck in if you want something to happen. So I don't know, that those were the two things that kind of struck me in Gareth's message. And I mean, he started off his message by saying perhaps not a comfortable kind of topic. Perhaps lockdown has made us lazy, but who knows? So I just thought we would kind of maybe we could try and kind of pick some of that apart by the kind of top few questions of the sheet that we got looking back at lockdown, and we'll just kind of have a little. There we go. So, well, Jace, why don't we tackle with the first one? Do you feel that during lockdown you've been cut off at all from community?
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Next question.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I am not neurotypical. That's the right way to put it. And so I've found it different, but I didn't mind. Like I know, like, to begin with, I'm not seeing people. I'm not seeing people.
Yeah.
But I'm just that kind of person. It's it's dreadful. Sure. But also I'm quite connected online. So in my work, I've got chat apps kind of running all the time. I've got so in my previous job and this one, we've been pretty good at keeping touch, over Zoom and that kind of thing, or Teams, or whatever it is you're using. So I didn't feel cut off from my professional community. Perhaps that's the best putting it. But personally, obviously, my family, and church community, really, really cut off from. And
I think that those are probably the ones that a lot of people are going to struggle with the most, particularly family, I suppose. But I mean, it's been great that obviously technology has saved the day in a lot of ways. Obviously, being able to stream the services as well has been a great help. I have to say, one of the biggest stresses was in the first lockdown, not being able to order all of the things that you would usually get in the Sainsbury's shop, but couldn't find any chopped tomatoes. That was a nightmare.
Yes, I remember. Because we sort of, Michael wasn't it wasn't too long into lockdown when Micah was born, and I needed to pop out and get some bits, and I hadn't even processed, because we were kind of prepared to not go anywhere or do anything.
Sure.
Because we're having a baby, and so to an extent that wasn't quite so weird. But going into Waitrose and then kind of realizing, whoa, I can't just buy a tin of sunset. So weird.
Well, I'm going to jump ahead to the third one. If you are and about, just wondered if you. Katie says, "Yeah, no flour or eggs." There we go. Everyone took up baking, didn't they? But I'm going to jump down to the third one, and if you are out and about, what new signs of God at work have you seen? I think that actually couples with something Gareth mentioned on Sunday, which is kind of as this idea of us re-emerging. Do you feel that God's call for you has perhaps changed? And obviously that's a personal question that you can ask yourself, but also is that something that we should be thinking about a lot more as a church as well? Are we just returning straight back to, are we doing the same thing as we head back into church, or are things going to look different? I think there's this idea of things staying the same as perhaps being stale, and the idea of things changing too much being a fresh idea. That's a great idea.
Sorry, it's just mainly
yeah.
because I thought I should put Slido back up so people can see that and rejoin if they need to. But I'll hide it again in a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, Karen, what you're saying?
Yeah, well, just kind of this idea of whether our call might have changed personally or as a church. That's kind of the angle that I'm going with, and something I picked up from Gareth's message. And does returning have to be the same? Are we going to scare people if it's different? It's kind of knowing the balance and which is the right way, sort of thing.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think we're all different after this, I think, aren't we? Yeah. And there are things that we think about that we'd never thought about before, and like silly things like you're watching TV and people standing close together going, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And people touching each other. No.
Yeah. What's a hug? What is a hug?
So I think we're all different, and then I think that's kind of true for everyone else as well, isn't it? And it would be silly to expect everyone's changed, and as a church our mission is to people, isn't it? We're people. That's what we do, and so it would be, I think, weird to kind of assume that anything could go back to absolutely the way it was. And kind of, as well as being different individually, as kind of we're different emotionally, we're different in terms of how we think about lots of things now, but also we are a different community. We've lost people. That's been the horrible reality throughout this, is that there are people that aren't with us anymore, and so our community looks different. And as we as a church respond to that, as we come to terms with it, I think we should expect that there's what we do must be different. I'm thinking back to sort of how much the church changed after the war, or the Second World War. Well, but both, frankly, in terms of its tone, in terms of how it related to people, was very different if you look at history. And I think we're perhaps in a very similar position. It's a bit of an epoch for us as a church of there's going to be what the church looked like before and what it looks like now, and I think they probably should be different.
I think there's talking about obviously Romsey Methodist Church specifically, I think that actually the church has gone through quite an obvious physical change not that long ago, and actually the blessing to Romsey community that it has been since the renewal, is huge, isn't it? If you just think of the amount of people, local Romsey community, who are suddenly now walking into the church who would have never thought that they'd be walking up those stairs, sort of thing. And it has, so I think that there's definitely, we as a church have gone through quite a bit of an unusually similar step already in the not too distant, previously. But I'm glad you used the word different, that we're all quite different, Jace, because my question was actually going to follow on from that. What if and I say our, as Romsey Methodist members, what if our callings are different to our neighbours? How do we kind of align those different callings? Which I think is, people might come flooding back to the church, with all sorts of ideas and ideas for where the church should be heading and where, and where the priorities lie, and how will that mesh together, sort of thing. I mean, it's great that obviously the message that Gareth said was, let's be motivated, let's be determined, sort of thing. Get stuck in.
Interestingly enough, I think that Slido response is a good, an interesting kind of way of putting that. Even more can happen if we all shovel together. Because that's what a church is in that sense, isn't it? We are a group of people with a shared mission, and we meet together in worship. As well, it's both and. It's not just a group of people that happen to sort of celebrate our faith together on a Sunday morning. It's bigger than that. We'll come to that in a minute. It's bigger than that, and I guess that's always the challenge for a church, isn't it? We are a group of people that have something in common, but we're all a bit different. How do we, as a group, pull together and go in the direction that we feel God is calling us to? And what if our calling differs from our neighbour? I think it depends, doesn't it? Because we all have a personal mission, a personal a place where we are as individuals called by God to go and do something and make a difference, or just to be, and to be the body of Christ, as God put it on. Gareth put it on Sunday. But as a church, we kind of say, hey, here's what we're good at. Here's what we can do as a group of people. We kind of put it in the pot, don't we? And then we say, right, well, what can we as a church then do? Where should we be going? And it's a bit tricky because obviously you have to cut your cloth, don't you? It's sort of there's an act of economics there, isn't there? You can only do so much. We've only got so many people. We've only got so much time. What do we do? We can't do everything.
But the idea, I suppose, playing to our strengths in some ways. There are certain things that the church, that we're doing really well. Does that mean that we should focus on those areas, or is it the opposite? Do we need to be kind of branching out into those areas that we don't feel as comfortable in? I mean, what if our calling is more like Jonah, who really didn't want to go and do what God was asking him to? But it'll be interesting to see what the community feels.
But we don't we're not a church in a vacuum, are we? Certainly in Romsey there are 6-7 other churches. We can be, and there's something to be said for being smart as the body of Christ, that with all these other churches, that we can work together and say, well, actually, what are you good at? What can you do? You do that, you be you. and here's where we can do it. And I always think that, as even just in Methodism, but certainly in with churches like Together in Romsey and what have you, we could be smarter in that respect and be a bit more look at the town of Romsey as a whole and say, okay, where can we as a church make a difference? How can that complement what other churches are doing? Maybe if another church is doing something really well, maybe we shouldn't do that. It's an interesting question.
I mean, this idea of sort of getting stuck in that Gareth mentioned, if there's if we've got that determination and that new kind of re-encountering spirit sort of that Gareth has stirred within us, what does that getting stuck in actually look like? Properly, is it just? It can't just be sort of helping out on the church rota, or is it just
Depends what the rota is, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Is it a case of, okay, well, this person's good at this, therefore you're in charge of doing X, Y, Z, or whatever? Is that what getting stuck in is?
I want to say, in part, like you don't want to say we've all got different callings and we're all good at different things, aren't we? And so we're really going in for this. Hang on, I've got to put that up there. Some use shovels, some use picks or forks. Play to your strengths for working together. There you go. That's a great. But I think that's true of the. I guess what I was saying about church is true inside a church, isn't it? Like we can't all do everything. We're all good at different things. What can you contribute? There are certain things, certain missional responsibilities that we all have to do. And I'm thinking about our sort of what I would call our gospel responsibilities. Like we have a responsibility to other Christians, to help in their discipleship. We have responsibility to everyone, to make Jesus known, to improve everyone's relationship with God as far as we can. But we all do that differently, don't we? And we're all that can be as spiritual and warm and fuzzy and personal, and if you're good at talking to people and helping them to understand, I don't know, if you're a great evangelist and you're good at helping people understand Jesus through your experiences and are able to communicate that eloquently, great, brilliant. Equally, if you're a really technical person and you can only you can enable people to communicate with technology, with what we've been doing digitally and that kind of thing. And I speak as someone who hopefully tries to do both of those things. I don't know, but it's true across the spectrum, isn't it? I think it's very easy to say, oh well, someone that's very kind of practical isn't that helpful spiritually, and someone that's very spiritual or isn't necessarily isn't necessarily all that helpful practically. And it's easy to put people in those boxes, but the point of a church is that all of those people, wherever they kind of however they do it, we do it together, and we're bigger than some of those parts.
I guess it's we are all advocates in different ways, and we are as a collective. We are all God's hands and feet. In completely different roles.
Yes, and
one might. Yeah, go on.
Well, no, because I think speaking as a techie, I think this is one of those key things. It's very easy to kind of look at the techie sat at the back being particularly geeky, fiddling knobs and faffing with cables, and kind of not appreciating that what they're doing is exactly the same as the worship leader in the front singing with their arms in the air, that they're both enabling people to worship and connect with God, but it just looks so different, doesn't it? And I think sometimes we kind of forget that we're all doing the same thing in that, aren't we?
Yeah. It just always reminds me of what Heather has a memory of Wyatt saying to her when in worship band, of sort of it really matters how you play, sort of thing. You have a job to do, sort of thing, and you've got to do it to the best of your ability, sort of thing. Because what you're doing is for God and for other people, and hopefully connecting people to God. And he is right. But that's wonderful from Annette.
Yes, exciting. Welcome.
Yeah.
From Portsmouth, the far east.
Well, we haven't got very far through our questions, but why don't we pick out? Well, let's pick the bottom question. Does your community look and feel different now? I suppose that's quite a big question as to what does Gareth mean by community? Does he mean the church community? Does he mean Romsey community?
I mean, yes and yes. I think we kind of covered that, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think I even put it up when I thought about it, because we talked about it on. Yeah, we did. So yeah, I think yes, it does. And then I guess the onus is on us to, as Christians, as church people, to work out, okay, how do now it is different. Well, what do we need to do differently? Many things, probably.
Yeah.
Which well, anyway, sorry.
I was just going to kind of pick up on I mean, the whole theme of Sunday was about this idea of re-encountering. And Gareth asked a question of how do we re-encounter each other? And I thought, for me, that was a really interesting question to sort of ask, because it's sort of asking, what is the quality of your encounters as you come back, back in touch with people, and he went on to sort of ask, how do you re-encounter God? I think the how is a very important part of that question. I effectively took that question to mean how are we catching up with the church community meaningfully? Are we typically British people who just awkwardly but politely sort of ask people how their day is and how the weather is and all of that? Or are we trying to kind of dig a little bit deeper and actually sort of take some sincere sort of interest and care in people's relationship with God, our interest, and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's just the message that I've completely taken. That's what I took from Gareth. Yeah.
I think that's a really good question, isn't it? Because if I'm honest, I think that's something that we've never nailed as a church. Frankly, I know we've got home groups, and we've got WOW, and we've got other groups that do talk about real stuff. You know, beyond that kind of it's nice to see you, that actually do talk about faith. But I think for for Methodism in general, I think for a lot of people that way of engaging with faith has not been normal. It's been I'd kind of say it's probably the most important part of my faith. That kind of not just Bible study, but like talking with you now about this stuff. I think it's so important, and we have to do it. But I think I think Romsey Methodist Church has never really got that right in terms of how we manage to communicate that to everyone and how we enable everyone to do that. I know there's a piece that the leadership team is doing at the minute to look into that, and unfortunately that was kind of sort of made more difficult by lockdown, because again, we're an older church, if I put it that's just a nice way to put it, but we have a larger cohort of people that aren't digital natives, who aren't kind of on the internet all the time like you and I are, and I found that a slight struggle, because my kind of assumption was, we're going online, so we'll have people chatting online, and
sure,
we'll have chat rooms and the Discord channels and all that kind of stuff, and then the church can digitize. But of course, it's just not that easy for most people to do that. And I think it will take us to be able to do that properly. It is going to take us being back in the building and having physical meetings and chats over coffee and that kind of, because we're good at that. We are good at that. But actually, I think lockdown has been harder for us, given our size and that kind of thing, than it has done for other churches that have kind of more people that can run that kind of stuff, or just more people, or a bit bigger.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I was really sort of challenged by the message that kind of Gareth was kind of pushing us to kind of this idea of, are we just, when we re-emerge and we are back into the church as normal, are we going to fall back into the norm of are we going to be just grateful that we're just out and about again, that we're back in church and that will do, sort of thing? Or are we going to sort of be back in church, genuinely caring about sort of where other people are at, and sort of, hopefully being able to get a little bit deeper with people. I mean, I think I can't even remember if I've mentioned it before. I've certainly mentioned it to you, but not on the podcast, maybe. At my previous church, when we were at Portswood Church, we did a series of Frontline, basically, where you are, where your Christian life meets your very sort of non-Christian friends or work colleagues or whatever. And we did this whole series for a couple of months on it. And it was amazing how the church community, the conversation at the end of church services wasn't the usual kind of pitter-patter of, how's your week been, sort of thing. It was kind of completely transformed as to, how's your front line? How can I be praying for you in places where, your Christian life meets your non-Christians friends, that sort of thing. And I thought, and I think that's a great thing about sort of doing the themed stuff, because we've got stuff to discuss, especially with this theme. We've got stuff that we can talk about. I mean, we're obviously doing it and it's streamed live, but people can get on the phone to each other or get in a garden together and hopefully kind of chat through some of these questions and do a similar thing. And I hope that was kind of where Gareth's message was getting to, of a kind of, well, should we see whether we can kind of scrape a little bit more out of the barrel, sort of thing, rather than just how's your week been and isn't the weather lovely recently, sort of thing.
And I think I'm hoping that perhaps that's one of the things that lockdown will have changed in us, because I think what it has done is it's made everyone much more aware of it's because it's not just how's your week been, it genuinely thinking, okay, how are people doing, and actually beyond the kind of sorry, you can probably hear Micah screaming away.
Right.
He has got so many teeth emerging at the minute. It's not doing well for him, bless him. But sorry, yes, I think it has focused people's minds in being concerned for people's spiritual welfare, beyond that. I don't mean that in a super spiritual kind of way. I just mean that in a actually genuinely caring about how people are doing, where they're at, not just kind of their health, not even their mental health, but beyond that, of actually are they coping, and are they doing well? And obviously as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we know we have a solution to that problem. If people are struggling, we know how we can help people there. And I think hopefully that's going to be something that stays with us and that we'll be reminded of as we carry on and start talking to people. Well, not talking to people, just talking to people, but meeting with people, and then can take those kind of conversations a step further. And even though things will go back to being kind of okay again, that we'll remember, well, actually, are they okay? How are they doing? How is their faith? How are their relationships with other people, etc.
Well, and Gareth said it on Sunday that the pandemic has raised questions for a lot of people. And Marion said it last week. People have turned in new directions for kind of answers. I mean, and Gareth says we need to be ready for that. We need to be ready to be God's hands and feet in those situations.
Man, yeah. I could talk on that for hours, so I won't. There was just one thing that I thought was interesting that I just want to add before we wrap up, because we've waffled on. God, but hopefully people have enjoyed our waffling.
Yeah, hopefully.
Do keep adding to Slideto, and we'll come back to that next week. What was I going to say? Oh, that the whole passage with Elijah, and that it's not so much running away, but he's kind of giving up, I guess. And I sort of put it, or is it giving up? But I could. That's not the best way of putting it, giving up. But I put he's fleeing for his life. I mean, and it obviously what he's been called to do is hard. But I kind of put, is Elijah trying to retire? And it was interesting because I got engaged in an online chat with someone that I wish I hadn't, frankly. Facebook groups. And someone I sort of questioned what churches were doing about a specific situation, sort of how churches are getting on with reopening and that kind of thing,
Sure.
And following all the COVID rules and that stuff. And we've got all that extra stuff we have to do. Mm-hmm. And someone sort of came back to me and said, "Well, oh no, it's just too much work. We can't do that. We can't go back to church because we can't be doing all the cleaning and the risk assessments and the admin work and that kind of thing." And I thought, crumbs. And I sort of came back with this: is that you not wanting to open the church because it sounds like too much effort? I'm not sure that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's okay as a position for a church. And they came back to, "Oh well, our church is mostly we're all quite old." I forget how they put it, but
sure.
So we've done a lot,
right?
So we can't, we can't. I thought, it did sort of make me think of this passage of Elijah kind of thing. I've gone through a lot, Lord.
Yeah.
Can I take 5?
Yeah.
Can I just pass the baton on to someone else? That
sure.
kind of thing. And actually, I wonder if are we ever done in our job as Christians? It's an interesting question. Well, actually, if anyone's still watching, drop it in the chat or Slideto, because I'd be fascinated to know what you think. Because I don't think you are ever done. I think you kind of, it's our mission to do all we can for as long as we can. As long as we can. I'm not suggesting that if you can't contribute, then that, of course, if you can't, you can't. But if you can, I think you must.
I mean, that goes.
Think?
Well, it just reminded me of obviously what Marion said last week on the podcast, where she was just like, God doesn't promise us comfort and ease. In fact, Jesus says it's going to be really hard and it's a lot of effort, and some of you are going to really suffer for it. And that's sometimes, it's hard. It's hard to hear, isn't it? And sometimes you do just need that bit of extra motivation and determination. Exactly. Don's just said, no, it is hard at times. Yeah, for a lot of people, it's, I suppose that's the one thing that we can take, is that Jesus said it's going to be hard. I mean, we know that. I suppose that's kind of, it's finding that way of finding that motivation, and I think that is something that is easier in the collective, isn't it? Because actually you're often bolstered by the people around you, and it just goes back to, as you say, shoveling all together. If someone's really tired, then someone else picks up the slack and can motivate others and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Should have Don on the podcast.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. Great. Don, you got the job.
Next time. I've promised to co-opt him on when we to talk about treasury stuff at some point. Should be good.
Excellent.
Anyway, yes. Sorry, Joe. I would say yes. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. Well, as you say, we've waffled on, but I've found it really interesting. I hope we've kind of managed to tap into what Gareth was hoping to mention. But I'm enjoying the series and looking forward to the next one. So
it's going really well. I mean, obviously, we also didn't get all the way through the sheet, but I think if anyone else is following the Reencounter sheets and have any, and the questions on there, we'd all be really interested to hear your answers and your thoughts on that. If you do go through it, pop anything that comes up in Slido, and we'll talk about it next week.
Those sheets are available on the website. So yeah, if people have lost their
Yes.
sheet or don't know where to find it, just head to the RomseyMethodist.church, and they're all downloadable in PDF form, I believe. So
Yes, they are. Yes, and there is there's a link in the description and the chat as well. So
perfect.
but we must
So
go.
no excuses.
No excuses. Maybe a few.
Cool.
But should we end with a prayer?
Let's do it.
Father God, we thank you for your invitation to re-encounter you. And thank you that is always an option that is open to us, no matter where we find ourselves, no matter how far we feel, no matter how far away we feel we are from you, Lord, that you are always there inviting us to encounter you. We pray especially this week for Gareth, and that you would restore him and that he would be well. And we look forward to seeing him at the weekend. Amen.
Amen.
Right.
And scene.
And so, I'll cut us off there. Thanks to everyone for joining in.
Yeah.
And on Slido, it's been great. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. On Sunday is Gareth again. And the theme is, I had it right there and I've clicked away. The theme is refocusing, which is hopefully we'll pick up on what we've been talking about. We talked about what we might need to be doing different, and I think Gareth's going to talk to us a bit about that on Sunday. So we'll chat after that. Thanks all, and cheerio.
Yeah, see you next week. Bye.